In today's presentation, we're going to be talking about architecture's role in climate change. The first topic is going to be the cause of climate change. One of the greatest influences of climate change have actually been human beings since the Industrial Revolution. They have released many greenhouse gases by the burning of fossil fuels. The release of these greenhouse gases are directly related to global warming because when these greenhouse gases are in the atmosphere, it prevents any heat from the sun to escape our atmosphere, which ends up in the rise of global temperatures. Human emissions, all the countries in the world are powered by mainly fossil fuels. Climate change has been proven that it is caused by greenhouse gases. This has been proven by many climate scientists, from the rise in temperatures and the rise and decrease in precipitation levels and the changes in ocean currents. The problem with architecture is when New York City's commission made a report about the consumption of energy, it reported that many of the buildings account for most of the population's consumption. Buildings actually account for about 48% of the energy consumption in the U.S. This is one of the main reasons as to why greenhouse gases are emitted, and this relates to architecture because they are projects constructed by architecture and they need to find ways into making them more ecologically safe. The responsibility of architects, there's a quote here that says, as architects we have the ability and responsibility to provide solutions that minimize the climate impact of the structures we design. This was said by Larry Strain, who is actually the principal of Siegel and Strain Architects. The effects of climate change. Well, human activities have caused about a 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit increase since the 1850s. This was reported by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. If the globe were to increase at its present rates, by 2040 there will be drastic side effects. These side effects would include food shortages, wildfires. There would be a mass die-off of coral reefs as soon as 2040. Some causes would be such flooding coastlines, such as the flooding of Florida or flooding of the tropics, somewhere around there, and intensifying droughts, and this would intensify poverty. There can be reachable goals in trying to change this. By 2050, the use of coal as an electricity source would have to drop from the nearly 40% of today to between about 1 to 7%. There would have to be an increase in the use of renewable energy sources. And renewable energies would have to increase to 67 from the 20% use of electricity that we have today. And all of this would prevent the global warming of 2.7 degrees, which is when all those drastic side effects of climate change would start coming in. The proposal that is being made is that architecture's role needs to focus on being more environmentally friendly, such as when their projects are being made, they also need to take into consideration of how their materials and how their buildings will affect the climate in the long run. And such international policies need to be made that incorporate ways to reduce carbon emissions. And also we need to work with communities to achieve goals a greener way, which means that architects need to work with communities to help achieve their goals, but also educate them about the greener ways of living their life and being able to construct their lifestyle around environmentally safe areas. Some of the solutions that I have are various tools that architects can utilize. Most of the materials, there was actually a project called Drawdown, which was a book written by the author and entrepreneur Paul Hawken. He ended up gathering 65 researchers, scientists, engineers, and policymakers, as well as a few architects and designers. His main purpose was to identify the best solutions to reduce carbon emissions. His goal was to identify and to find the most effective socially, ecologically, and technological solutions to reduce carbon emissions, like I just said. And building materials, he found out that building materials were the main way architects could help fight climate change. The next solutions would help climate change by reducing energy use, isolating carbon, and replacing existing energy sources with renewable energy systems. Some strategies that architects could use is environmental product declarations, which are reports from manufacturers that describe the life cycle impact of a material or product. By doing this, architects can look for materials and see a brief description of it, and to see what they're getting out of the resource and how to reuse it or dispose of it properly without creating such a great carbon footprint. Also, another strategy that architects can use would be remodeling of existing buildings. Zero waste, which is basically using materials to the best you can without overusing them and throwing away extra pieces. Also limit carbon intensive materials, which by doing this, if you limit carbon intensive materials such as aluminum, plastics, and foam insulation, you can reduce the carbon emission, and architects should be more considerate of those materials and make the most out of the small amounts that they should use. You should also use lower carbon alternatives like wood structures versus steel and concrete. Also the reuse of materials such as wood, glass, metals, brick, and the use of high recycled materials applies to steel mainly. Virgin steel can have a carbon footprint 5 times larger than a highly recycled content steel. The policies proposed would be the creation of green policies, which would set a standard of how much a project can emit carbon into the atmosphere. And it would also policies such as architects having to use local and recycled products. And also, architects would also have to use one of the strategies mentioned before, and at least one of the strategies in every single project that they do. These solutions are being put into action by the Illinois Green Alliance. This is adopting the drawdown strategies, finding partners, training. This is all within a 4-year time span. 2 years in, and there's a lot of progress in training. This is actually happening in Chicago. There's been partnerships made and community bonds that have been made with the partnership with the Chicago Housing Authority, the Chicago Urban League, the Salvation Army, and so on. The future generation of the world honestly depends on the change of now. If we don't change now, the damages and the repairs will be immense and irreversible in the future. We need to change now, because if not, it would be almost impossible in the future, and all the drastic side effects mentioned earlier would affect our future generation. And these are the references.